The first thing we will do is have the pledge. Mr. Trent, could you lead us?
Of course. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I have to point out the emergency exit sign so you know how to leave the building in case of an emergency, and do it please in an orderly fashion through the exits and to outside. Also, this is a smoke-free school district, which means no smoking in the building or on the grounds. So the first thing we're getting to here is the board consent agenda. All right. I have a motion to approve items C1 through C3. Mr. Nix, second Mr. Trent. Any discussion or questions about any of these items? Okay. All in favor of approval? It's unanimous. Do we have any cards for commentary?
No.
Okay. Communications and announcements, and that brings us to you, Dr. Gianni.
Yes, I will start it off. Thank you. I'd like to congratulate our students, faculty, and staff on another outstanding musical production. I had the opportunity to see Beauty and Beast this past weekend, and as usual, the performance was truly outstanding. Time and time again, I'm simply amazed with our talented students, the dedicated faculty, and our staff in our school's music and theater program. Congratulations to all. I am also happy to report that over the weekend, our varsity wrestling team hosted and won their league wrestling tournament. It is the second year in a row for the team to earn this honor, and this weekend the team will be competing in the Suffolk County Championship at Suffolk County Community College. So congratulations to them and good luck. Another item, it's our understanding that a rumor had been circulating on social media concerning an alleged obligation to pay money in connection with the Washington, D.C. trip. We are aware that the rumor refers to an enforceable contract, which is binding on the district. However, after reviewing the document and questioning and conferring with counsel, we believe this claim is without merit. Moving on, pre-registration. It's just around the corner, and we are now scheduling appointments for the week of March 23rd through March 27th during the day and in the evening on March 26th. You can schedule your appointment online or by calling Central Registration Office. For more information, please visit our website. And then finally, in the next couple of weeks or so, families will be receiving information and an invitation to respond online to the 2020 census. Some families may also receive paper questionnaires. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance to responding to the census. The distribution of federal funds, grants support our schools and are based on this census data. So please respond and be counted. And that is all I have to announce, President Hayes.
Okay, but could I add something to your announcement about the census?
You certainly may.
So, in addition to your being aware of, or rather the public's being aware of how important it is that everybody get counted, the information that's given to the census is protected information, and it cannot be pulled out or given to any other agency. It's used, what we're interested in is, like you said, it helps us get monetary benefits that we're entitled to, and you know how things are very tight for the taxpayers, so any monies that are coming to us would be very beneficial. So tell everybody in your family, every neighbor, anybody that you know in your neighborhood, just be sure everybody gives the census information so we know how many people actually live in the area.
And we're going to be connecting with the PTA council and the PTAs and the principals also to get that information out to the community as well.
Oh, good. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right, trustees, do you have reports or advisory committee reports? And I'll start on Ms. DeSanto.
Well, yes, I've attended one of our committee meetings, the health and safety, and I was very happy to hear that we're going to be participating in safety drills with local law enforcement, and that's being worked out because it's always best to be prepared. And I'm looking forward to our committee meeting tomorrow, teaching and learning.
Thank you. Ms. Aruda? Mr. Puccini?
Yeah, sure, I have a couple things. First, I unfortunately couldn't make it to the production of Beauty and the Beast this weekend, which I was really kind of crushed about. We had a lot of obligations in the way. But I did get a copy of it, which I plan to watch with the family this weekend. So I'm pretty excited about it. I heard it was amazing. And knowing some of the students, I'm sorry I missed it and glad I'll get to at least watch a digital version of it. Couple of things in the past week. I did stop by the wrestling event at the high school. It was nice to host that event. It was nice to see how that program has really come along. It really was an excellent event. It was presided over by our superintendent due to a conflict with our athletic director. So Dr. Gianni spent a long day in the gym watching wrestling. I guess that's not the worst thing for you, though. But it is nice, and the wrestling program definitely is up and coming with a lot of underclassmen that are doing really well, so that's great. The basketball team last week did clinch a spot in the playoffs. First game is tomorrow. Will be a very difficult test, playing probably who I think is the best team in the state. But if UMBC can beat Virginia last year, anything can happen. So we'll see. But good luck to them. It was an up and down season, but I'm glad they made the playoffs, and looking forward to the game tomorrow night. A couple weeks ago, I mentioned an away game at Smithtown East and how great they did and entertaining the crowd during the games and at halftime. And I'm always, I always think we do a great job as well. But at senior night last week, I thought all the groups really did a great job. From the cheerleaders, the dance team kills it every week. So if you haven't come out to see the dance team, they're great. And we have the same young lady, I think 3 or 4 games in a row, who sang the national anthem, who really does great. So it's nice to see an event where there are so many more than just the basketball players on display of our students. And it's nice too, because those families, they might not be basketball fans, have somebody on the team, they come out to see the performances as well, and it brings people in it. So it's really a nice community event. I believe we have one of our runners qualified for states.
I think our swimmer, one of our.
And I was gonna ask about our swimmer.
Qualified for the counties.
For the counties, yeah. So
I don't know about the runner.
So I'd like to hear about the swimmer. I'm in the swim industry, so that's why it's important to me. I'm kind of curious. So I love that we have an independent swimmer. I also want to mention myself and a couple of board members, Dr. Gianni and some cabinet members attended the Longwood Legislative Breakfast. Was that last weekend or the weekend before? I don't remember. It was the weekend before, which is always an interesting event. I missed it last year, and I kind of remembered why. It is interesting, and as we get into budget season, there is a lot of the same talk out of the room is always about, we need more money, which is true, but there's not enough talk about what school districts can do to cut expenses, to alleviate some unfunded mandates on top of a lot of other things, which I'll mention, how we go about soliciting business for certain bids through that e-biz at BOCES. I don't think, anytime we want to do a project, it costs school districts more than I think it should, and that drives me nuts, and that's not talked about enough with our legislators, because I believe we can ease the burden to our taxpayers and our community if we can discuss the expense side a little bit more than the revenue side. We can't just keep asking for more every year. Then the issue that brings me to that is I do have a question about, we continue to have an issue, and I don't think we've had one in a few weeks, with vandalism of our fields here at Critz and behind central office by ATVs. And the reason I bring this up is because I've for long wanted us to fence in the property. But I believe the first quote we got was something of $80,000 to $100,000 to put fence around Burnt Critz, which seems astronomical. I think I did the math, and it was like $200 a foot for the fencing. That's an example of how I think things are cost prohibited to school districts through the BOCES eBiz program, and I know there's probably some ways that we could put out a bid that's a little bit more specific to help it, but with that, I do have a question as to, because I know we were looking at some things in the short term to put some barriers up along the fence to prevent, because we believe the ATVs are coming from this wooded area back behind here, although it's not uncommon to see them riding right down Dutton Avenue on the weekends.
We haven't decided on that yet. We are looking at it, and after we involved the police, the issue has subsided. However, I understand today that the ATVs may have showed up again.
Well, it was a nice day today, that's probably why.
So we do need to take a look at that.
And the fields are soft from all the rain, so they probably got ripped up pretty good.
I don't know if they got on the field. Yeah, they didn't get on the field. They were in the neighborhood.
Yeah, so, I mean, it is a problem, and it's been a problem for a long time, and it really stinks because those fields, especially the baseball fields, are maintained by volunteers from the Little Leagues. They raise money, they put some money, they donate resources and products, and then to see some kid come through on an ATV and rip it up after, you know, if you're a parent like me of small kids, you know you have little time, so when you do volunteer, that time is sacred. So to see somebody destroy that work is frustrating, and it's really unfair to those who helped raise the money, who donated the money, and those who did the work. So I would hope, as spring is coming, by the lack of snowfall that we got this year, but it will be spring in probably another month, it's gonna kick up again. But it's an unfortunate, and to keep going here, because one of the issues we had with bicycle kids a couple weeks ago was we close off and gate off the parking lot, so when the cops are called, you can't even pursue the kids, because they just go behind the fence, and if the cop doesn't feel like getting out and chasing a kid on a bike, which I'm sure doesn't happen a lot to begin with, you know, it creates an issue. So I'd like to see what we can do to fence in our fields while making our parking lots accessible. So,
Okay. Ms. Carly, and could you please also give us an in-depth report of the Saturday breakfast that you attended?
So in case you didn't see on the district Instagram, I also went to the Suffolk County Legislative Breakfast, and I think it was definitely interesting to hear what our elected officials have to say, especially a lot of school-related topics. You know, it was definitely interesting, but I'm glad I had the opportunity to attend with some help from my AP government teacher, Mr. Budris. He helped me come up with a question that I was able to ask, and it was definitely just an amazing opportunity. So that was my summary.
and Carly did a great job, I left that out. She asked the question to the legislators on behalf of the district, and she did a great job.
Fantastic.
Student Council will be applying for the National Council of Excellence Award, which is a prestigious award that recognizes strong year-round programs for student councils. So the submission deadline is within the next few weeks, and we believe that we meet all the qualifications, so hopefully we receive that award. I'll keep you guys updated. Student Council is still collecting items for the coat drive until the end of February, so we'd really encourage everyone to, when you're cleaning out your closets, or you can just take a look and really bring any donations you can. We really encourage you, because although it is still warm out, you know, there's still people in need, so we encourage you guys to bring things. Also, spring sports begin the second week of March, which is Monday the 9th, and I'm excited to see what the spring season has in store for all our athletes.
Thank you. Mr. Trent?
I had the pleasure of attending the Belleville High School Beauty and the Beast musical. And from the students acting to the costumes to the set, everything was just, it was awesome. I also attended Brookhaven and Vernon W. Critt's Career Day. Got to see a lot of different, you know, professionals, and I liked how they had things that the kids could engage with. One, there was an engineer who had brought an RC car that he put a light and a camera on, so the kids were like kind of like using it and stuff, and it was great. And then I also had attended the Health and Safety and Strategic Planning Committee. I attended with Chris and other board members the William Foy Legislative Breakfast, and I also attended the Vernon W. Critt's PTA meeting. But that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Nix?
I was also able to attend the legislative breakfast, and Carly did a great job. At the risk of going negative, that's all I'll say about the legislative breakfast. We had the strategic planning meeting, committee meeting last week. We talked about some different policies that had to be revised and introducing a new one, which we're going to be going over tonight, and ways that we can use the Family Engagement Center. It was a good, productive conversation, so thank you, Dr. Gianni. And I was also able to go to 4 different classrooms at Brookhaven Elementary School and read some books and chat with the kids. So I want to just say thank you to Dr. Raymond, Miss Missick, a 3rd grade teacher, and Miss Noldy, Miss Suarez, and Miss Mason, who all teach 2nd grade. Thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to get reminded why we do this and speak with the kids. I look forward to going to Burn Crits at the end of the month and doing the same thing.
And I can report that I've had a lot of fun since our last meeting, because I also went to the high school musical, and it just was incredible. It was way beyond anything that I had expected. And in speaking to some of the parents of the actors, they all commented about how the students had been so busy, and it's a very time-consuming project to get involved in, but they loved it. And you could see it just from everything that they did. Also, Carly, you set the bar at the legislative breakfast. You asked the first question, and I think you took us in a really good direction, and we appreciate you being such a stellar representative for South Country. We also have, I went to the middle school last night for their Black History Month program, and it was wonderful. They had the young people who were like the master and mistress of ceremonies, and they had some invited guests, an assistant professor from Stony Brook, and they also had a special dance team. It's called the Cadence Step Team, and if you ever get a chance to watch the students perform, take advantage of it. It was also interesting at the Black History Month presentation because Dr. Colson had some introductory remarks, and he said that at the middle school, it's a 3A school where they're focused on attendance, achievement, and attitude. And he said that the attendance rate is 95% or better at the middle school. And I see our photographer who was there too, so you heard the same thing. And the attitude is coming along. The students want to be in school, and it just was a really nice evening. So I think that's it. I don't have business to report about anything since the last meeting, but to be able to go to these activities was really great. Okay, I think we're still with you, Dr. Gianni.
We're heading back to me, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, and we are going to move on with our meeting and items for discussion. And our first item for discussion is a presentation and recognition of a problem-based learning project our 9th graders participated in this school year. To make the introductions, I would invite Mr. Small. Mr. Small.
Thank you, Dr. Gianni, and thank you, members of the Board of Education. Over the last 2 years, Belport Middle School, there is a group of teachers and administrators who have been undergoing training through the Buck Institute in problem-based learning. And the goal of that program is to connect the content with real-world experience and to give our students the opportunity to engage in problem solving, to work collaboratively, and to think critically about how they can impact their classroom and world. We have one high school teacher, Mr. Budris, who has enthusiastically volunteered to be a part of that program. And he has been spearheading that program at the high school. The Kiva project is a living example of that. And so without any further delay, I'd like to introduce Mr. Budris and Mrs. O'Hagan, our Director of Humanities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Small. Thank you to the Board of Education. Thank you, Dr. Gianni, for really providing us this profound opportunity to showcase the amazing work that has been happening at South Country with problem-based learning. Tonight, we're really here to celebrate student voice and activism. We learned so much from our students and our hard work from our teachers, so we're really honored to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. So tonight we're going to showcase some of the work our entire 9th grade has been part of, and this is called the Belport High School Kiva Challenge. This was an all-inclusive and engaging PBL that every single 9th grader was involved with in partnership with the South Country Educational Foundation. As Mr. Small mentioned before, we've been going to the Buck Institute, so thank you so much for the high-quality professional development that South Country has been part of with problem-based learning. And through problem-based learning, we have learned through PD that our students are really kind of engaged in the basics of a PBL experience. There is a driving question that serves the problem to be solved, and it's a meaningful question. And it's real-life relevance to our students. It's really important to them. They're really changing the world with this question. They collaborate in groups together. The presentation is a work product. Essentially, it's really student activism and it's informed action. And it's something that they wholeheartedly believe in. And it really focuses on voice and choice throughout the entire process. And it's really inquiry-based.
So just to give you a rundown of some of the specifics about the Kiva Challenge project, it's a certain level of complexity to it, but it all begins with 9th grade students at a time when they normally study within the state curriculum, the interaction between people and their environments and the influence of the society that people are in and how it impacts their lives. Rather than simply having them study it out of a book or taking notes, instead we decided to assign in each 9th grade class groups of students to study a particular country and then study the challenges that geography of the country can present and challenges that people face within that society. So students were grouped, they did research on a particular country, and then we introduced them to this organization known as Kiva, which arranges microloans for people. Microloans was something I'd become interested in a few years ago, talking about how small amounts of money loaned to people in countries that don't have functioning banking systems can make a huge difference in helping people progress economically. And these are loans. What people would do is they go to the Kiva website, they can pick somebody to loan money to, they find out exactly what the person would be doing with that loan, and then they transfer the money through Kiva, and then the money must be paid back. Kiva actually has a 96% loan repayment rate, so almost all money that gets loaned out is paid back in full. So once the students had a country to research, then they went on to Kiva and they themselves picked an applicant from that country that they thought was very deserving of help. The students created a Google slide presentation that was meant for their classmates, where they would present on the country that they researched and on the applicant that they were advocating for. Everyone did a Google slide presentation that involved certain academic feel, using evidence to support claims, that sort of thing. And then every group had free reign to create some sort of a creative element to it. And we saw lots of really interesting creative elements. That was one of the best parts about the project, was when we didn't prescribe to the students exactly what they needed to do.
So we did like videos, commercials, artwork, so they chose what they wanted to do, and that was the power of that. So that was a really great part of it.
It was fantastic. And then once the students presented to their classmates, then the class themselves acted like a grant committee,
they would vote to see who would be the most persuasive. The teacher didn't have a vote, we didn't have a vote, we wanted to make sure that it was entirely in the hands of the students. And we had, well, this is one of the most important things I should have put in earlier, we were funded by the South Country Education Foundation. So South Country Education Foundation gave us a $2,000 grant, and we used all that money, every dollar of the $2,000 was used for microloans. We have 20 ninth grade classes. We took $75 for each class, and that was the grant that could be awarded for each class. That accounted for $1,500 of the $2,000. I'll tell you what we did with the remaining $500 in a sec. But within the classes, the students voted, and they communicated. They took a vote. The teacher told me which group won, which applicant should get the money. I contacted South Country Education Foundation, and then we literally transferred that money to that applicant in real life. So that was throughout the entire process. There was never a concern about whether or not they were doing something with real life relevance, and it was all really an effort to meet our curriculum goals of making sure that students understood the connection between people's environments and their lives.
Something that stood out to me when I heard the students present, they really spoke from their heart. They hardly even looked at the PowerPoint, they just spoke to us and had these amazing arguments backed by evidence, and their research was all up here and in their heart. So it was really powerful to see them present something that they were really so passionate about.
Okay, so here's just some photographs from some of the projects. You can see the variety of creative work, the use of technology. We have students that did original artwork, paintings, to advocate for the person that they were, the applicant that they were advocating for. We used our district technology. We had some of the young ladies in one of the pictures there, they're behind us tonight. They did some things that we hadn't even anticipated would be part of the project. They went home, spoke to their grandparents, they interviewed people, brought in artifacts from Ecuador because they were advocating for somebody from Ecuador. So it really went in directions we didn't expect.
They kind of drove it.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Including, like Ms. O'Hagan said, videos, and some of the videos were so high quality. I'm glad I didn't try and prescribe the process because
Flipgrid and
they
podcasts.
did way better than I could have anticipated. So all 20 ninth grade global studies classes, global history classes participated. That means the pre-AP pre-AP world history classes, the self-contained special ed classes, the inclusion classes, the general ed classes, the E&L classes. Every single student in the ninth grade did participate. And that was one of the things that we were committed to when we designed the project, and it was one of the things we were most proud of. On the classroom level, the teachers were really essential to the whole process.
They really were.
I don't teach ninth grade. I came up with the idea for ninth grade, and I came to the teachers, and they were really all in, and to come up with something and write it up on paper is one thing, but to have people embrace it, especially when they're giving up a couple weeks of their instruction, is not easy to do, but they were really essential. Now the last stage, we took all 20 classroom winners, and we had an event in the library, which was hosted by Colleen Oates-Robish, who I believe is here.
Right there.
Yeah, she's our new librarian. She
helped us out
she's an
tremendously.
excellent host. And we had the Kiva Challenge finals, where all 20 groups that had won the classes competed against each other to a group of outside judges. We had one of my professors from Hofstra, Dr. Andrea Labresco, who's in charge of their civic engagement minor program. She's written on how to engage students in real life civic activism. Mrs. Diane Zanaz, who's the vice president of South Country Education Foundation. We couldn't have done it without that group. Ms. O'Hagan, who got a little misty at times every once in a while when the presentations.
I be a judge because I think everyone's going I can do it.
And we also, it's something we try and do when we work in social studies, we included one of our students from the graduating class because I do believe that we have such great talent, as evidenced by Carly.
Yes.
We always want to tap into that sort of thing. So
it was great having a student judge on the panel.
Yeah, so they listened for a few hours to the presentations. They picked a first, second, and third place winner. They actually picked two groups that tied for third. The last $500 will be allocated by the students that were in the winning groups. The first place winning group will allocate an additional $250 in grant money. Second place group will allocate an additional $100, and then the two third place groups an additional $75. So they'll go back on the Keven Fund other applicants. They kind of won the right to decide where the money went. So, at this
So we're going
point,
to call up Mr. Kogan
yeah.
and now recognize our
We're gonna
amazing
recognize
students
some
and
of our-
teachers
I
who are
have
part
a
of this
question
project.
before
Oh, sure.
you call up all of these
Yes.
Sure.
participants. Maybe it's later in your presentation and you'll tell me that, but could you give us an example or two of a country and a project that was selected to be supported by our Kiva participants?
So we can do it one of two ways. I can tell you, or
Let's
we
the
could have.
students
we
tell
could have
us.
the
Oh, you
students
can
do it.
have, yeah.
Okay, that's
They're the
even
ones who
better.
chose,
Yeah.
and
Okay,
I was aware, but they're gonna be.
Okay.
if I
They're ready, they're ready, they're
all
ready.
right.
But
Thank
you
you.
might
Little
as
Manny.
Any volunteers?
well- How about a first
Maybe
person?
Ms. Palladino.
Come on up. And then, yeah, let's have all our winning groups come up. All we're gonna ask is that you just tell the board what person you picked and what they're gonna use the money for. So these are our first place winners. We'll introduce them by name in a sec, but just come up and say who got the money and then why you picked her.
Well, our person that we picked, her name is Olive. She was from the Philippines. And there wasn't any particular reason why we picked her because there were so many great stories out there of people who needed the help. But what stood out to us was that she had a single income household and she had about 4 or 5 children who needed education. And she runs a small business store and she just needed the money to buy items to keep her store going. And she was doing fine already. She had the business for quite a few years at that time. So she knew what she was doing, and we felt that she would really benefit from having these extra materials so she could support her family and her children.
Thank you.
One of our winning groups.
So our participant that we chose was Edison Santiago, and our country was Ecuador. So he works like in a farm for agriculture, and in Ecuador for these past few months they have been going through a bunch of stuff, vandalism, and it hasn't been safe either to be able to come to the country or even leave their houses. So it's a very dangerous place over there, and we've decided to help him because with that money, he's not only helping his family to get money, but also other people because he's going to help refugees. So it's not going to only benefit him, but other people in the country. And it's going to help him like get all the food and necessities that other people need, like for the supermarkets, because people are now stealing and a bunch of stuff over there, and sometimes it's not even safe to eat out of the food. So with that money, he can like help raise and help other people. That's why we chose him.
Thank you.
It's, let's see. Is Ryan and Edgar? You guys want to come up real quick and tell us?
As they hide in the back. Hiding in the back didn't tell you no.
Come on up. Just let us know, like, I believe it's a t-shirt that you guys have. Here, step up to the podium real quick.
Alright, so our group, we picked a man named Desoka. Basically, he's a teacher and he wanted to pay to send his younger brother to school. The reason why we chose to donate to him was because he comes from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. That country is in Africa and it is a very war-torn country. There's been civil wars. And it's gang-ridden. The police are corrupt. The government's corrupt. It's a really, really not safe place to live. And so, if he can afford to send his younger brother to school, and if he can afford to support himself, eventually they'll raise a new generation of young adults and young people to potentially turn the country around and make it a better place to live.
Andres and I were trading strategies on how to deal with the fact that we're both nervous before this.
So what country did you pick?
El Salvador.
And who did you want to help?
Mi sister.
And why did you want to help Mrs. Stark to do what?
la ayudaría porque ella es salvadoreña igual que mí y muchos estudiantes en la High School.
Okay, so we wanted to help her because she's Salvadorian like her and like many other students at Belfort High School.
Y también me gustaría ayudarla porque ella se ve que es una persona luchadora y que le podría pagar lo que debería.
She looked like she was a hard-working woman and that she'd be able to pay back her debts, which a lot of our students were concerned about.
Porque ella se dedica a la venta de comida como por ejemplo las pupusas, enchiladas, todas las cosas.
She has a business dedicated to selling like local native dishes and foods on a local level, and it would go to buy ingredients to help with that. ¿Y por qué quiere la venta para el dinero para qué?
Para poder también sacar adelante a su hija que quiere tener una mejor educación ya que ella no la tiene.
And so she wanted to do this so she can help put her daughter through school, being that she herself was not able to have an education.
Gracias por siempre estar ahí.
Thank you for your attention.
So that's a project that happened in their classes 5 months ago. And we didn't prepare what we had just discussed, so I'm very impressed by the endurance of Amy.
Yeah.
Have you had any follow-up from the people who received these grants to find out how they've been doing?
Kiva isn't really set up to give feedback as it's happening, but you can log into the account and see the payments that are being made. So they usually pay on a monthly basis, and the loans are somewhere between a year and 3 years. That's one of the nice things about this too. As the money is being repaid, South Country Education Foundation is already committed to funding next year, and I'm going to apply for the year after. And I believe within 3 years of funding, it should be self-funding indefinitely, because we'll have a pool of money that keeps coming back into the account, and we just use it each year. So these are our first winners, but I think we're going to be coming back frequently.
But I heard through your presentations, a number of you mention that the recipient wanted the money to be able to help a family member with education, and the whole idea of education just seems to be running through this entire project, and for the people that you selected, and that is why I was hoping that maybe we would get feedback to find out that a recipient was able to use the money to educate someone in his or her family, and what's been done with it.
I'm going to reach out to Kiva again. I tried to talk to the public relations office to let them know what we were doing, and haven't got the connection back to them. But I would love to get that sort of feedback and then be able to relay it to the students.
Follow their journey.
And I think all of our young people need to be commended for their good research skills in identifying a project that was worthy of support, and also to be able to express it tonight when you weren't sure, you didn't know you were going to have to come and talk in public, and each of you did it, and did it beautifully. We thank you very much.
Mr. Hogan, are you gonna?
Yes,
Maybe bring up
I'd be
the
happy
teachers and then we'll bring up the students?
All right, so it's my pleasure to recognize our teachers that are here with us tonight from the top, actually our top 4 groups here. First, second place prize winners, and then a tie for third place. And then we'll be giving certificates to all of our students. Just to echo what Ms. O'Hagan and Mr. Budress said, this was an entire 9th grade project, so we had a lot of faculty and staff involved throughout, so we congratulate all of them. So I would actually like to invite our teachers and staff members who are here up first. We'll take a big group photo. Certainly Ms. O'Hagan. You can go over there.
Sorry, I was going to take pictures.
We won't leave you there alone. Mr. Budress, please. Mr. Feltman is not able to be here tonight. However, he was the teacher of our first place winners tonight. Ms. Palladino, Mr. Joe Scioli, And one of our E&L teachers, Mr. Sal Finicario. And our librarian who was instrumental in this entire project, Colleen Oates-Robesh. Okay, and starting with our first place winners from Mr. Feldman's class. First, Sarah Abdul-Bassett. Madeline Day. And Nikki Hirschkai. And Rachel Lee. Our second place prize winners from Ms. Palladino's class, Andres Reyes. Carla Benavides. Able to be here tonight, and I'm not sure Karen's here either.
No, they're not.
Karen Aguilar is also not able to join us, but she was the third member from that second place, so we congratulate her. Our third place winners tied for third place from Mr. Scioli's class, Vanessa Perez, Destiny Rivera, and Emily Engamarco. Okay, and also tied in third place, also from Ms. Palladino's class, Ryan Grell, Edgar Osorio, and Angie McLaurin.
Everybody just. Now it's going to be the challenge. Congratulations.
Yeah, you want me to go this way?
If the faculty can get their heads between the kids, maybe, and the kids can kind of point in, turn. Here we go. Are we entitled? Come on.
Come on. Come on. Training, did you go to a doctor after?
Hey, you go here, I'll go over.
Okay, everybody look at me. Look over here. You just make sure it's perfect.
And parents, you can come up, we'll stay. So go. You got all right. All right.
All right, so thank you so much to all our teachers and students. We just want to close with a video and a quote from Vanessa. Where's Vanessa? There she is. So Vanessa said a quote that really stood out to us when she was presenting, so we just want to close with the quote that she said. This project was so much more to me than a good grade. This was about helping the world and about making a difference. This helped my country, my family, and provided such meaning to me. So thank you so much, guys, for your voice, and we're so proud of you.
Just before we have a quick montage video to show pictures when the project was at work, I just wanted to remember also to note that, again, the teachers were so helpful. especially love it when new staff members jump in. So Colin Robish, Self and Kiara, who's it's his birthday today. He's highly committed. He and Wendy Palladino, as E&L teachers, they understand that sort of instruction better than I could, and they took the project and made the necessary modifications, and it was the work that came out of their rooms, not just from the winning group, but from all their students, was really impressive.
Yeah, every social studies teacher at E&L special ed did such an amazing job in 9th grade. And Mr. Budress, who was the PBL innovator and pioneer with this, thank you so much, Mr. Budress. We couldn't have done this without you.
Oh, very good.
The video?
Uh-oh. Yeah, I think they're queuing it up.
Oh.
Some of the recipients with the students while they're doing the work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our next item for discussion is our second budget presentation of the school year. It is a review of the tax levy limit and projected revenues. And I'd like to introduce Ms. Costa to make that presentation. Ms. Costa. You might want to just wait a second, because they all need to come home.
You know how to fit a room, huh?
This one will be a little less fun. No one wants to hang around for this one?
Should I get that last?
Would you like to read Sam's Now's your opportunity.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, read it.
Are we ready? We're ready.
Good evening, Board of Education. I'm Dr. Gianni. I know that is a really tough act to follow. That's all I'm going to say. All right, so here we are at our second budget presentation of the budget development season. In our last budget development session, we spoke about the financial condition of the district and where we were in the past, and that sets the stage as we continue to talk through for the next couple of months. So tonight we're going to talk about the tax levy limit, and we're going to do a first blush look at revenues and the tax cap calculation. So I'm going to bring all these points up and I'll just speak to them. This is the 9th year of the tax cap levy legislation. So schools have been operating in New York for the 9th year under this law. And there are some truths and some items just to get on the table so we all speak the same language. There's a lot of people who say out there that the tax cap levy calculation is a 2% tax cap. And that's just not true. So as we go around, we should all come from the same place. The actual calculation is an 8-step formula. We're going to go over that in detail tonight. And then I actually say it's 8, really 9 steps, because there's an exclusions that you can add on after the 8 steps, which are part of legislation. So it's pretty complex, but the 2% misnomer, one of the steps is really a function of CPI and how we and how we adjust for CPI. And the law says it can never be more than 2%. So we are capped at that one step in the calculation at 2%. Even if inflation is running crazy in the economy, it's at 7% like it was in the 70s, doesn't matter, we will never be more than 2%. In the 9 years that we have had a tax cap, memory serves me right, 4 of those years we've operated under the 2% number. And we don't set that number, the state of New York sets that number, and we'll go over that as we continue. So on what the tax cap levy calculation really says to you, at this number, you can do a regular vote for your for the levy that you're proposing to your public, meaning you need 50% of the voters saying yes, plus 1. And if you go over that number, you need 60% of the people in your community saying yes. And that's really the basics of what the tax cap calculation is. We're going to go over it in detail. So there might be some redundancy on some of these. So we actually produce a levy here in the district. And what is the levy? The levy is the number that we share with the town that says this is how much money we need. So we go to them and say we need $60 million. And you might hear people talk about their tax bills, their tax rates, assessments. There's lots of words that are out there. And when people are talking about their tax rate, the rate is what you pay individually on your tax bill as a homeowner or a commercial property. And that tax rate is not fully controlled by us. We only control that one number we tell the town about, and how they apportion it, we'll talk about as we go further along. But those are 2 words that are out there. We only control the levy. It's one number that goes to the town. And there's many variables that affect all of this. So, okay, so what's the difference? As we just said, the tax levy is one number. We give it to the town. The levy is one component of the revenues that support the educational plan for our district. And the educational plan, many people call that the budget. And the spending side of the house, really the spending side of the house has to be married with the revenues that support that spending. So the tax levy is one of 4 buckets of revenue that we have to support our spending plan. There's a tax levy, there's state aid, we're going to touch on that tonight too. There's fund balance and reserves that the board appropriates. We talked a little bit about that last session. And then we have other revenues. And those 4 buckets make up the 4 components that support our spending plan. And again, the tax rate is different. It is homeowners, what they pay based on the assessment of their house, and we'll get into that in more detail. So some of the misconceptions are that you can't be over 2%. It's not true. The calculation, I'm going to go over it, is 8 steps plus maybe 9. And that calculation has districts all over the state of New York coming in anywhere over and above that 2% as allowable numbers.
Last year, we were over the 2%?
Yes.
And that was because we utilized those.
We were within the allowable tax levy limit for the calculation.
But we were still over the 2%.
Yes. Our allowable limit was 3.36%, basically.
Okay. Are you going to explain why that?
Well, you're going to see it when we see it becomes clear when we see the calculation, and we'll go through that. And you'll hear people, and sometimes we get calls from people, and particularly in my office, that says, oh, the levy was only increased by 2.1%, let's say. And they say, but my tax bill went up 3.5%. And we have to explain to them the relationship between the assessment of their home, which is out of our control, how the town assesses, and that we only give the town a levy in one grand total amount that was 2.1% greater than last year, and how they apportion it. The town is really involved in most of that, and we'll continue to talk about that tonight. So let's look at the 8-step calculation, 8 plus 1. I'm going to bring them all up on the screen now, and then I'll talk about them holistically. So what we start with is our prior year tax levy. And this is all legislative. This is prescribed by law. There's a tax-based growth factor that we apply to that. Basically what that tax-based growth factor is, and we'll continue to talk about it tonight, is the brick and mortar construction happening in the district, both commercially and residentially. We don't set that number. The New York State Office of Real Property Services set that number, and it's really a compilation of literally brick and mortar work going on. And that actually lets you make a slight adjustment to your tax levy if it's greater than 1, to account for the fact that people might be putting extra buildings on, extra rooms on their homes, things like that. And then you make an adjustment for last year's pilots that you had. Pilots stand for payments in lieu of taxes, and payments in lieu of taxes are basically properties, they're always commercial, that came off of the tax roll and the assessment roll of the district. They're not within the district's control at all. The local IDAs for towns and counties really address all of that. But what it means to a school is they literally, the pizza pie, I always say that's all the assessed values in the community, they literally are taking out of that pie and they're not part of the pie anymore. So those payments in lieu of taxes are granted by county and town agencies. So we add it back because the calculation allows us to kind of add it back. Because if they didn't get that exemption, that pilot, they would be part of our taxable base, so it gets added back here. And then we make adjustments for prior year things, court orders, capital costs. We actually don't have any, so I won't go in great detail here. And here's the part of the calculation on the allowable growth levy factor. This is the CPI that we're talking about. This is where that 2% number that floats around comes out. But it's not always 2%. And we're going to learn this year that it's only 1.81% this year. But this is where we actually get to grow our tax levy, which we're allowed to come back to the community, and that's where the growth comes in this factor right here. And then, again, because pilots are not part of our tax base, they come out again, because we're going to get those payments. There's actually agreements that are set with those organizations that say they pay this much in payments in lieu of taxes to our district every year. So we take them out here, and we address any carryover. We don't have any. I looked back, we've never had carryover here. It's unusual to have carryover. And this brings us to the tax levy limit. After the tax levy limit, we have exclusions, and we'll talk about them later, but let's go through each calculation this year for us. We'll talk about them on each slide, but at the very end, there's one page that summarizes it all, so I'll go through this part quickly. When we get to the end, you'll see it, and I think it'll be clear to everybody. Our last year tax levy was $62,240,685. We start there. We multiply it by the growth factor, which is the brick and mortar construction of the district. New York State gave us that number. Unfortunately, we were a district that had no noticeable brick and mortar construction in the whole district last year. So we got no impact of this number this year. We then add back in last year's pilots, kind of brings us back to those items that were taken out of our tax base. These come back in from last year. We don't have any court orders, judgments, and last year's capital costs. So from there, here's where we've now had our levy from last year, and we added back our pilots. That's really where we are, and we now give it the growth factor. This is the 1.81% that the state has determined. Now, what the Comptroller's Office does is they comb many of the CPI indexes. It's very, there's not one CPI index, there's many, and they comb it and they come up with a rate that affects us this year. They have determined that the rate is 1.81%. Fortunately, it wasn't at 2%. From a lobby perspective, I think most organizations are lobbying for it has to always at least be 2%. We're under 2%, but when inflation is going to be sky high one of these days, because history repeats itself, we have no ability to go over 2%. So I think most professional organization groups are lobbying that it should always be no less than 2%, but we haven't got there yet. And for us, just so everyone knows, the difference of 1.81 and 2% is about $130,000 for our district, a little over that. Okay, so now we subtract out the pilots as part of the calculation, and we come, now this is a new item this year, we come to carryover. We haven't had carryover, and this year, it's been on the table for a couple of years, but finally it happened. BOCE's capital exclusion, we are allowed to add on after we calculate our whole levy, we're going to go to exclusions, anything that the public voted on in a prior referendum, could be from many years ago. We do a bond issue, we can add that back on. People voted on that another time. So you get to layer that on. They say we can tax for that building, we get to do that. Well, we have been saying that BOCES does the same. Every cost for BOCES, when they have capital and they make improvements to their buildings and they go out for bond issues, why can't we write off that? Because all BOCES does is push their costs onto their component districts, which is us. So it's been lobbied for a lot of years. It's been in the legislation since 2015. finally, they have got together and figured out how they're going to do this. This is the first year it's impacting us. And we all thought that the carryover calculation is a little complicated. It's very unlikely we'll ever have a carryover calculation. But you'll see later on, it also affects our exclusions later on. So we'll talk about it. I don't believe these numbers are not out. BOCES is working on them. They've been working on the state. So we don't know that. That's why it's open right now. And here is that add-on I spoke about. After the 8 steps, you get to add on for these items. The first 2 are legislative in nature. They were passed in the law. If you have court orders or judgments that exceed 5% of your levy, you can add them on. I think most of this, I don't know for sure, but I think most of this was upstate schools that do their own tax collecting. So there's a lot of cases on that. It doesn't really pertain to Long Island. And if the retirement systems increase their pension contribution cost by greater than 2%, the piece that's over that, you can take as an exclusion. That hasn't happened. I think 1 year out of the 9 years it's happened. So it has not happened. And here is the capital costs, both local and BOCES. What are capital costs? Capital costs for us are our bond, principal, and interest payments. But what the state says is you can't just add on all your bond, principal, and interest payments. You have to adjust it for the fact that you're getting building aid for the state. So for our district, we do have bond issue payments and we do have interest, but we have building aid that exceeds those numbers. So for us, we have no local capital exclusion. But BOCES is working on the numbers, and actually I was just there yesterday. And while we think it's going to be negligible, we thought that it would only add to what we could put in our levy, even if it was by a little amount. We're now hearing as of yesterday, it's looking like it's going to be a deduct, negligible deduct for most districts of $1,500 or less. And why is that? Because the state is saying to them, we recognize you have principal and interest payments and that you get aid on them, but you also charge rent in a lot of your buildings, so where they're making them bring rent into the equation. So, and because the rent then reduces the cost we pay for coasters and things we sign up for BOCES, they're saying districts already got a benefit for the rent, so you need to adjust for the rent. So this is a new development. So it doesn't look like we will have an add-on. If anything, it'll be a very slight difference. So for this year, our tax levy limit calculation is coming in before exclusions and before the BOCES pending items at $63,547,263. That is a 2.1% increase over the prior levy, and that's $1,306,578. So let's look at it in this format. This is more of an accounting way to look at it, and you can kind of see how it flows. Line 1 is where we started, prior year levy. Line 2 is the brick and mortar change that we get to make. We have none this year. Here's where we add our pilots back from last year, kind of addressing the fact that they were taken out of our tax base. And then in line 6, there's a typographical error on that rate. It should be 1.0181, but the numbers are all right. It's a Word document, so the numbers are all right. I'm just noticing that as I look. But line 6 is where we adjusted by the 1.81% inflation factor, I'll call it. That becomes our new subtotal levy, we'll call it, where we have to take out our pilots for the coming year. And just so everyone's aware, the pilots, like we talked about, are out of our control. The town and county IDAs have control over that. We have embarked on a project and we want to get the underlying pilot agreements. We have gotten an okay from the town that they're going to share what they have, a verbal okay, but we really need to see the underlying agreements, and we have half in our possession and we're working on the second half right now. And here are the 2 items impacted by the new BOCES capital exclusion. Don't believe there'll be any impact in line 8, the available carryover. But the line that's underneath that doesn't have a number is the exclusions, and there could be a slight impact there. So here we are right now. That's our estimated tax levy limit calculation, and we will be continuing to visit that the whole time we go through the budget process. So here's our first peek at revenues that support our educational program. The first line is what we're talking about tonight, the allowable tax levy limit. We're also going to talk about tonight the governor's proposal that came out last month for state aid. So it's an integral part of our revenue sources. Here you'll see the pilots, and here you see miscellaneous revenues. Through each step of this process, these numbers will be changing, we'll be looking and we'll be reviewing. But let's take a close look tonight at the word that's been out about what the governor is doing with the state aid and what came out in the first round that he proposed. So what he proposed was interesting, and if you were at the Saturday legislative breakfast, you heard it from many entities. But this is what was published as the increase. It was a $1.8 million increase, and that's how it was presented. It literally looked like that when schools got it. And if you looked quickly, you're like, oh, it's 1.8, but anyone who's been doing this long enough, there used to be more lines in what came out, and you started to say what was missing. Well, the very first line, right here, that foundation aid section of what he proposed, he actually was proposing in his presentation of the numbers to all districts, consolidating 10 expense-based aids into that one number. Why is that important? Because expense-based aids were never part of foundation aid. Foundation aid is legislative, it's by law, and we all know there's been conversations of districts who are not fully funded under the foundation aid formula. So expense-based aids are not part of the legislation. They are different, and to get the money for expense-based aid, you must spend the money. You don't spend the money, you don't get the money. So you're not getting anything. You have to spend money to get it. So here he did is, he tried to roll them up. So if you look at the second column, the 2021 column, and it says 41,283,207, when you take a close look on the next slide, you'll see that this is how it used to look. So the same column, 2021, the bottom, the 41,283,000, now represents the same number that he presented here. That's the top number. But now, when we break it out as to what it used to look like, we actually see what the current law said the formula should have been, starting at 35 million, and we go all the way down to the 10 expense-based aids that he rolled up into that number. Politically, they say he rolled up a lot of the numbers because it changed the conversation a little. He was able to say, look, we're going to fully fund districts that are not fully funded under the foundation aid formula. It makes them look like they might be more fully funded, but it's really not true. But here is the interesting piece when we unraveled South Country. On the bottom line, that is our increase, is 0.65% is our foundation aid increase. Foundation aid increase allows us to do the great things that we do here with Kiva. We make our own decisions that are good for kids, roll out programs that we think are great. So this says $234,000 and a 0.65%. When districts dove into this number, the average for most districts was 0.75%. So right here, we're below the average. But now when you dig even further, I'm going to dig further yet again, we're going to look even closer at that number. If you actually look, the line that says community schools increase is $130,000. That money comes to schools that meet certain requirements and have certain needs in their communities. But it's not earmarked to do whatever we want. It's like a part of the foundation aid legislation. We have to supplement, we can't supplant. So we can't use that for collective bargaining increases, health insurance increases, program increases, any increases. We have to add something new to actually get that 130. So when you pull that $130,000 out of our foundation aid, the 0.65% number, it's really not even that much. It's $104,000 that we got at 0.29%. That's the foundation aid we got. The current, I know all of the advocacy groups, New York State Council of School Superintendents, New York State School Boards, New York State Association of School Business Officials, they all oppose the new presentation it's not just a presentation, new proposal of the governor, because the talk beyond this is he's trying to make this number, I'm going to go back a slide, he's trying to make this number be the foundation, $41 million, and that expense-based aid should go away. And he's trying to change that, and we are opposed to that on many reasons, and that's for the different meetings. So, so here we are. Here's what our first glance of state aid looks like. There's $200 million in the governor's budget that is not allocated to districts yet. This is the time everyone's now lobbying for what they want. The $200 million could turn out to be a little more, but that $200 million will probably be allocated to districts, and I think a lot of the chatter is the needs of districts, and there's at least a little recognition that Long Island's needs are changing, if there's any positive to this. So here we are. That's this presentation right here that we are having today, tax cap, peek at our revenues, and we're going to meet in 2 weeks. We're going to talk about these three areas. I call these big budget drivers. This is general support, operations, and security with transportation, and we are out to bid for our small special ed van lines right now, so we're out to bid. And we're going to talk about all the benefits next time we meet in 2 weeks. And here's the future calendar: curriculum, instruction, staffing. We're going to update everything, and then the board's going to adopt, and we're going to have an election. So there we are. Any questions?
Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
On slide 18, can you explain why the miscellaneous revenue decreased?
Sure. So what we're doing in, as we develop the budget, I'm going to backtrack a little to say that I'm sure the board knows that we have both transparency and ESSA reporting happening for the district. New requirements that we report both our budget to the state and that we also report our expenditures to the state so that they can also see, are we spending our money in the right places? So we also are doing that for all, so what our budget now looks like, it's changing, and we're going to see in the next couple of years that we have to make some shifts in some of the codes and how we present so that we can more easily report to the state. So we're doing that in all the areas, including the miscellaneous revenue area. There's a couple of line items of miscellaneous revenue that over the last 3 years, we have not realized that revenue. It has not come in. So as we prepare, our budget and...
I'm sorry, so we were reporting that we were receiving revenue that we actually weren't?
When we build the budget, you're estimating and projecting revenue right now. Like, we're actually talking about that now, and this won't even be for the 2021 school year. This will go all the way through June of 2021. So some of the estimates that you make are based on things you might think come true, students you have. Some of the areas where we had challenges in the revenue was in homeless aid. We thought that would come in. We ended up not having as many homeless kids that we could claim aid from the county for. That just happens. And, I think when the Kenny Bento came out, there was a lot of conversation of how much we had on the table. Not all of that was realized. We also have some miscellaneous revenue items of refunds that we, have gotten in prior years that when we look back over the last 3 years, they haven't come in now for three years in a row. And it's time to start looking at them. So we're actually looking at each of those lines every week. Like just the other day, there was a BOCES refund that came in about $50,000 more than we thought, and I felt it was comfortable enough to up it another $50,000. But we keep looking at the lines, but it's important that we also align with what we don't think we're going to get either. So we build a budget that supports the educational spending plan.
If I understand the slide 18, the projected revenues, oh, never mind. These are only, the 1920 slide is last year's revenue, or is that, because it says budgeted, so is that the
Budgeted revenue.
That's a
revenue.
budgeted revenue, that's not budgeted expenses.
Well, at the end of the budget process last year, that budget, that was your budget.
So the budget last year was 134,600,000.
Yes.
Okay, this year, this is projected revenue, not projected budget. I'm looking for where our projected revenue is versus our projected budget at this point. Are we that far along yet?
The expenditures are not there yet.
Okay.
Next week will be our first.
I figured that. I just didn't know if we threw placeholders in there. I'm just curious where we were.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Are we good?
Good.
Does anybody else have a question?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our third presentation, which is on graduation data, covering the last 3 years along with some of our academic supports and interventions designed to increase our graduation rate. Making the presentation is Small, Mr. Hogan, and Ms. Stevo, I believe, and I'm going to ask Mr. Small to kick it off for us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Gianni, and thank you again, members of the Board of Education. So we have our graduation presentation for you. I'm joined in this effort by Mr. Hogan, our high school principal, and Mrs. Restivo, our guidance director. Mr. Hogan will start us off with an overview of the historical data. And Mrs. Restivo will give us some information about our current group of students, and I'll come in and conclude it with some of the programs and interventions that we've been providing at the high school across the district. So, Mr. Williams?
Okay, all right, thank you, everybody. All right, so as Mr. Small said, this is a comprehensive graduation presentation. Taking a look at our action steps and our current graduation status for the class of 2020, and then also looking back as far as 7 years in some particular areas. So our presentation agenda, first we'll take a look at some of the historical data. You have seen some of that in the data presentation that Mr. Small did in October. So I will try to move through that relatively quickly. We'll take a closer look at last year's graduating class, the class of 2019, which is also referred to as the 2015 cohort. Student cohorts are determined by the year that the student enters in September as a freshman. So that's it's apples to apples, but that sometimes we use different terminology. And then Ms. Restivo is going to walk us through the class of 2020, and then Mr. Small will finish up with some of the action steps and supporting programs that we have for intervention. So our historical data, again, you have seen this. So if we go back 7 years to school year 2013, you can see in the middle column our June graduation results, and to the far right our August graduation results. That was our lowest results, 2013. Our highest were in school year 2018. Last year we had an 80% graduation rate in June and an 85% graduation rate in August. This slide breaks down our graduation data by subgroups for the last 3 years, 2016-17, all the way up to last year, 18-19. The yellow highlights across the top column reflect June graduation rates, that's all students. The yellow highlights at the bottom reflect graduation rates in August. On the far right, you'll take a look at the kind of salmon-colored cells. Those are areas of subgroups where we had graduation rate of less than 75% in subgroups that were over 30. So that was 69% in our Black or African American population, 73% Hispanic. The 55% is our student represents our students with disabilities. And then the 70% near the bottom is our economically disadvantaged population. Okay, one of the questions that was generated either was in the data presentation from October or shortly after that was how many students did not meet graduation requirements by June or in our 4-year window. So if we take a look at the class of 2017, we had 51 students that did not graduate in June or August. We will also shortly be taking a look at our 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduation results for each class. We did have 15 students in the class of 2017, which is the 13 cohort, graduate our summer school program in August. Class of 2018, 32 students did not graduate in the 4-year window, be it June or August. 14 students graduated from summer school that August 2018. And then last year we had 51 students that did not graduate. And 19 students graduated last August. 18 were from Bellport High School, and 1 was from the Bellport Alternative School in North Avenue. Okay, so the state does calculate 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduation rates for each class and each cohort. If we go back to 2016, you'll see we had an 82% graduation rate in August. The following year, the 5th year, that June, it increased to 86%, and then the following year after that, the 6-year graduation rate was 89%. Class of 2017, 88% to 91, increased at the 6-year mark to 93. 2018, that was our highest graduation rate in August, that was 90%. After the following year, it went to 92. We'll know this spring in 2020 what that 6-year graduation rate will be for that class. And then obviously last year, we have our 85% in August, and we will know our 5-year graduation rate this coming June. And it's relatively self-explanatory, but I did want to clarify that the 4-year graduation rate is determined by the number of students who successfully complete all graduation requirements in June or August of their senior year, which is cohort specific, against the total number of students in that cohort, in that graduating class. Okay, and just backtracking a couple slides to last year's class of 2019. 79 South Country Central School District non-grads. Please understand that there is a graduation rate for the district that includes Bellport High School graduates as well as out-of-district graduates. So 9 of those 79 were did not attend Bellport High School, but had some other outside educational setting, BOCEs, Victory Christian, alternative high school, etc. That's often the number you will see reported in Newsday. So that left us with 70 non-grads from the class of 2019 or the 2015 cohort. To break that down further, 5 students were in our autism or our life skills program. They can stay in school until they are 21. They are identified as non-completers, but they do count against our graduation rate. 1 student in that program chose to leave the program and received a Skills and Achievement Commencement credential. However, that's formally known as the IEP diploma, but that also counts. He also counts as a non-completer. As I mentioned earlier, 18 students did graduate in August of 2019. The reason for their non-graduation status in June was multiple-fold. One was we had 4 students that needed to pass Regents exams. 12 students had course failures that prevented them from meeting graduation requirements, and 2 had a combination of both. 13 students remain at Bellport High School this year from that cohort. All are slated to graduate this June except 1 who just recently met graduation requirements this past January. Of those 13 students, we've identified some of the reasons for their non-graduation status, be it course failures, Regents failures, attendance issues, entering our district in their junior year with low credits, low native language literacy, issues of homelessness, and so on. So a student may be identified in one of those items or in multiple of those items. 4 of those students are now in the alternative, continue to be in the alternative program at BOCEs. Again, that's over on Martha Avenue. 1 just graduated this January. 2 students are scheduled to graduate in June and appear that they're going to be successful. And 1 of those students is slated to graduate next January in 2021. Okay? And then finally, 29 students on this cohort report were no longer enrolled in the district and counted against our graduation rate. So this included 19 students that left school, first time dropped out of school, did not re-enroll in any other school, perhaps moved out of the country, and 10 were long-term absences for 20 consecutive days or more. So if you take a look at 15-16, that was the cohort's freshman year. No one left the building that year. In 16-17, 5, probably a combination of the 2 students left. Junior year, 17-18, 4. 18-19, what would have been their senior year, 14 left. And 6 did come back this year for the school year 19-20. However, have left and not stayed for the entire 5th year. Okay, I ask Ms. Restivo to speak to the class of 2020.
Good evening, everybody. So I'm going to speak to you about the class of 2020, so that's the cohort of 2016. So again, these students started with us in September of 2016. As of February of this year, there are 323 students that we, on the New York State Accountability Cohort List, are accountable for. So that is our current cohort number. Now please understand that this number is fluid and changes constantly when students move into the district, move out of the district, but as of right now, that is our cohort accountability number. Currently at Belport High School, there are 6 seniors who are attending Belport High School that we know cannot graduate in June. So this gives you some more detailed information as to why they cannot graduate in June. The reasons are pretty similar amongst most students. So in terms of concerns of attendance, not meeting state exam requirements, meaning they haven't passed Regents exams, low credits, so they don't have enough to get to 22 in June. One student had been incarcerated and had missed her junior year. There's another student who actually moved to the country in November of 2019. And because of when they had started school in their home country, they are counted in this year's accountability report. So out of the 323 students, this is some information regarding those students. So there are 6 students who have actually already graduated from the class of 2016, from the cohort 2016 rather, meaning they will count positively for us. They graduated a year early. There are 5 additional students in our Life Skills and Autism program that will be considered non-completers at the end of this year. So these are in addition to the ones from last year. And there are 31 students in the 2016 cohort who no longer attend Belport High School. So similar to the numbers Mr. Hogan just gave you, their reasons for leaving, 14 of them have left school as a first-time dropout, 17 due to long-term absences. Out of those 31 students, we wanted to break down some more information for you there. So there are 23 students who were new E&O, new entrants to the district. All but 1 were new entrants during the high school level. 3 were special education students, and 5 were general education students. So these students, once again, started in September of 2016. None of them had left during their freshman year. 10 had left during the 17-18 year, 11 during the 18-19 year, and 10 so far this year in the 19-20 year.
Yeah, I have a question. So by those 31 students leaving, it has already affected the graduation percentage of the 2016 cohort?
Correct. Yeah, so we are already aware of 31 students. So we did want to outline for you, when do students become non-graduates? When are we aware of that? So there are 3 points in the year that the school counselors identify students as non-graduates. The first would be September of the senior year. So the counselors go through every student's records. They keep track of all of their Regents exams as well as the credits to date. So in September, we will identify students who do not have the appropriate course credit that they would not possibly be able to get to the 22 required credits for graduation. The second time in the year that we identify students as non-graduates would be January, so this just took place, where a student due to half-year courses or students in credit recovery that were not successful can no longer meet their graduation requirement status. And then again in June, typically the week of graduation, is when we would also find students due to course credit, lack of course credit rather, as well as failure of Regents exams. So action steps for the class of 2020. So these are some items that have already taken place that we have done so far to help our graduates get to graduation in June. Currently, there are 52 students that are flagged as at risk in our current senior class. So these are 52 students due to either previous course failure or Regents exam failure that we are concerned about. The school counselors and the 12th grade assistant principal, Mrs. Della Rosa, met with every at-risk senior at the end of Q1 to go over with them their report card, their grades, and remind them of their graduation requirements. Q2 has now ended, so that is happening again at this time. In addition, Mr. Hogan and Mrs. Della Rosa met individually with every one of those seniors again at the end of Q1, and those meetings again are happening right now for the Q2 failures. IEP teachers and the grade 12 psychologists are meeting and regularly monitoring the special education seniors and progress towards graduation. This week, meetings are being held between the school psychologists for grade 12 and the IEP teachers with the school counselors and the students to, again, go over their report cards, go over the expectations and things they need to do and ways we can help them. Some additional interventions that have been done by our counseling staff so far this year. A letter is sent home to every single senior outlining what courses and what Regents exams are needed for graduation. That also includes different diploma types. So on that letter, we not only outline the courses they need to graduate, but also courses and exams they need to get an advanced Regents diploma, as well as an advanced Regents diploma with honors and mastery. A letter is sent home to all students who had failed Q1 courses that they needed towards graduation. Students were enrolled in AIS classes, both during the day and during credit recovery. Students were enrolled in the credit recovery program for students who needed extra coursework to make them up. And there were individual senior planning meetings held between every school counselor and every student to go over what their postgraduate plans are and how the counselor can help them achieve those goals. Some action steps that are happening right now. So right now we are assessing the Q2 report cards and conducting more individual student and parent meetings as needed. We're assessing January Regents results and again holding those meetings for students who may still need a Regents exam to graduate. We're looking at test prep opportunities and credit recovery test prep opportunities for seniors. So for any senior who did not pass a Regents exam by this January, they will be re-enrolled in the several opportunities we have for test prep for this upcoming June exam so that they can pass before graduation. As I mentioned before, the school counselors will be sending the graduation in jeopardy letter at the end of every marking period. So a letter is sent after first, second, and third marking period so the parent gets in writing so that they can reflect back on it, what exactly the student needs. Our guidance teaching assistant will be meeting with students who have at-risk status to help them with their post-graduation plans. So what she will be doing is any student that we flag as at risk, if they haven't identified a postgraduate plan as of yet, she's going to be meeting with them. Because the hope is if we get them excited about a postgraduate plan, they might get closer to graduation. There will be administrator intervention meetings held with myself, the counselor, the student, and their parent for truly at-risk students. So when the counselors and students get back from the break, we're going to be inviting parents in to meet with me as well as the counselor to go over with the parent and the student together so they can have a face-to-face meeting to go over the seriousness of what they need to do to get them to June. And additional test prep enrollment for seniors will continue to happen. So, Mr. Trent, you mentioned before your graduation statistics. So this is what we're projecting right now for graduation this June of 2020. So students currently enrolled at Bellport High School that positively are going towards our graduation rate. We are estimating at this time there are 125 students in the senior class that are aiming towards an advanced Regents diploma. So they are scheduled for the appropriate coursework and the appropriate tests to get an advanced diploma. There are 133 students aiming towards a Regents diploma, 16 towards a local diploma, that would be some of our special education students, and as I mentioned before, 6 students who have actually already graduated. The non-graduates in the 2016 cohort. There are 6 students, like I mentioned before, that we know will not be graduating in June, 27 who have dropped, and then 5 students that will be eligible. Those are the life skills and autism students that I spoke of before. You'll see the SAC diploma. Basically, this is the Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential. So just because they're eligible for that now does not mean they actually will be receiving it now. Students that fall under the alternately assessed area have until the age of 21. They can decide anywhere between after their 12th grade year to age 21 to continue, but those students are eligible for that this year. So currently, as of February 2020, the maximum number of students who could potentially graduate is 280, meaning our maximum possible graduation rate would be 88.05. So now Mr. Small's going to talk a little bit about the supporting programs that we have at the high school and the interventions that we're doing so far.
So, recognizing that getting kids to graduate does not start in grade 12, but it starts from the moment our kids enter the district, but especially what happens in 9th grade. What we've been doing, we have the PASS program, the Positive Approach to Student Success program, which identifies students in grade 9, actually in grade 8, who are moving up to grade 9, who have exhibited behavioral or academic challenges. And we identify 40 kids, 20 kids in grade 9, and then they move on to to grade 10. And we divide them into 2 sections of 10 each, so we could provide them with small group instruction in the core academic area, because we're trying to support students to be successful in the classroom. We also have the credit recovery program that provides an online program that provides after-school support to students who have had failures during the school year, so that they could stay on track while they're taking classes in the regular school day to make up some of the work for the classes that they have failed in after school with the online program. That program primarily works with our 11th and 12th grade students. Earlier this year, we presented our response to intervention plan. Response to intervention is a proactive program where we have a team of administrators and teachers who meet on a regular basis to review students who also have academic and behavioral challenges, appoint a case manager to support those students, and just regularly meet to discuss those kids, what interventions are being provided, whether or not those interventions are working, collecting data about how they're doing, and just try to monitor and support them as they go through the school year. We also have our student support team, which is primarily our counselors, our social workers, and psychologists again, who meet to look at at-risk students to provide those supports to them as they're going through the school year. And so regularly meeting about students to discuss how they're doing, to provide them with support as we go through, and to ensure that we're giving them the social and emotional support that they need, and hopefully be successful throughout the school year. This year, not just this year, but we have an attendance protocol, and we've aligned it district-wide, where we're following the same attendance protocol. One of the big things that we have been looking at is the issue of attendance, reviewing data on a regular basis. And so we are being proactive. We are contacting parents about students who have 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20 absences as we go through. Because one of the things that we do realize is if students are not in school, they're not going to be successful. And we want to be proactive in terms of contacting parents with letters and bringing parents in for meetings. We send our community liaisons out to go do home visits and try as much as we can to get students to come back into the buildings and come back into the classrooms so that we can provide them with the academic support to be successful in school. One of the, as we go through our cycle of reviewing data, we realize that 2 of the Regents exams that have presented the biggest challenge to our students is global history and U.S. history. And so the state gives us the option of giving our students the opportunity to do work-based learning and to do over 216 hours of work-based credits to use that in lieu of passing one of those Regents exams. And so right now we have 28 students who are on that path for CDOS, which is a Career Development and Occupational Studies pathway. So we identify students who exhibit those challenges and provide them with the option of engaging in work-based learning and provide them with the opportunity to meet graduation requirements. Seniors who still need Regents exams are given Regents prep after school through credit recovery. We have, during the regular school day, as part of our AIS program for the 4 content area, we have extended classes where every other day they get an extra 40 minutes, where the teachers could provide students with additional interventions to support them throughout the course of this school day. And what we're truly paying attention to is the issue of equity and opportunity. We believe that if we start opening up opportunities for students in grade 9 and giving more students opportunities to take certain classes, that hopefully we will start seeing that with more students in certain classes, we will see where we can start retaining more of our students and keeping them engaged and being in the classroom. So this year, we are starting pre-AP English in 9th grade. And we believe that's an opportune time with open enrollment to encourage more students to be engaged in those classrooms. We started pre-AP World History last year in 9th grade. And so these classes, for these classes, we are looking at students who we know have the ability and the potential to do well in those classes, and we're encouraging them to sign up for those classes, to enroll for those classes. We are starting AP seminar in 10th grade next year, and again, encouraging students to take those rigorous courses, to engage them, to be a part of that process, and hopefully see that more students will remain part of the cohort as we go forward. In looking at our data, to see that our second language learners have been having challenges over the course, if you look at the data about the students who have dropped out or who have leave school without us knowing where they are and they're counting against us. We are looking at providing more support to our second language learners in the core subject areas. So in 2015, we provide co-teaching in global history and geography and for 9th and 10th graders. In 2016, we provided that same support to U.S. history. Again, to provide a co-teacher with a content area and an ENL teacher teaching side by side with those students to provide them with the support in the classroom. We've also provided in 2016 an ENL ELA class, again, to provide students with content in their native language. And for students with interrupted formal education, we have one of those classes with a curriculum that is recommended from the state, again, as an extra layer of support for our students. Last year, we started with algebra. We added Algebra 1, where we are providing co-taught class, again, small group instruction, 2 teachers in the classroom to provide our second language learners with additional support. And then the same thing in 2019, we started providing that support with our living environment class. We've been running our Saturday Academy on Saturdays, where we do Regents Prep with students at the Family Engagement Center. We have over 20 students this year who are engaged or a part of that program, where they go on Saturdays for 4 hours, where they're being provided with support in preparation for Regents exams, and we're getting good success with that because that has helped some of our students to do well on the January Regents. As part of our efforts, we're also looking very keenly and very closely at what's going on in classroom, because we do believe that as we are providing students with support, we have to also look at the quality of the instruction that's going on. What can we do better? How can we better support teachers and through this process? So this year, building administrators have been going through classrooms to do walkthrough as a building. They have a Google Doc that they collect data about what are the things they're seeing as they're going through classrooms. Are we seeing learning objectives? Are we seeing student engage in student-to-student discourse? Are we seeing where students are being provided or asked to engage in higher order thinking? And so as they go through, they're collecting that data, reviewing that data, and sharing out that data with classroom teachers to say, this is what we're seeing as we're going through. And that has been part of the process this year, where it's been happening on a regular basis. We have just finished, one of the things that Mr. Hogan also did this year is to talk to teachers about how are they aligning their subject area with the standards. We want to teach to the standards, and so we're having discussions with teachers about aligning the instruction with the standards. That has been going on this year, where administrators in the building are meeting with teachers, talking about the standards and how to align their practices with the standards as we go forward. We've just, yes, sir.
Are teachers extensively trained in what the standard is?
Yes, that is a regular part of our professional development. So, but it's not one and you're done. You have to constantly review it, and then you have to go into the classrooms and monitor it.
But they're aware of what the standard is?
We've just finished our second quarter exams. We have now where the building administrators and the directors are scheduling meetings with teachers for after the break to start going over the results of that data. To sit down with teachers to say, here's what your pass-fail rate is. Let's talk about the children. What do you think are the reasons why kids are not doing well? How can we support you? It's not just about identifying the problem, but what are some supports that you need? What can we do to support you to better meet the needs of students in the classroom? One of the things that we did, and I mentioned this when we did the data presentation, our ninth grade Algebra 1 scores have not been what we want them to be. And this year, we have actively engaged in professional development with our ninth grade Algebra 1 teachers, where we have a company, consultants who are coming in to provide coaching. So to meet with teachers, to plan instruction, to go in and coach and look at what's going on and provide teachers with those support. And so by looking at data on a regular basis, engaging with discussions with teachers, and providing them with the support over the long term, we believe that we will start seeing some of the improvements that we're looking for. For the class of 2020, one of the things that we are looking at is to also start surveying our customers about their experience as they when they leave the high school, about how they believe that their experience was at Bellport High School, and what can we do better to better serve and support our students as we go through this. Professional development, as I said, is the key towards supporting teachers. We have, it is actually state regs where we have to provide a certain amount of our PD support to teachers on how to support second language learners. So we have engaged the services of Dr. Andrea Fonisfeld, she's from Malloy College, where every teacher in the district is provided professional development after school about how to support second language learners. One of the other things that she's done too is to come in and she works with Mrs. Tetuan to observe our co-taught classes, where we have ENL teachers and content area teachers teaching together, where she plans with them, observe, and provide coaching to them. And so that process started this year, and we're working through that. You saw the presentation with project-based learning with Mr. Budris and Mrs. O'Hagan. We started that training at the middle school. But we do believe that when we have children who are engaged in real-world experiences, when we connect the content to real-world experiences and give it relevance to children, when we give children the opportunity to work collaboratively, give them the opportunity to problem solve, give them the opportunity to be engaged in the learning process, that we will see better results. So we believe that the project-based learning initiative will be a good support for our students, not only in the middle school, but also as we go into the high school in the future. K through 7, we have Teachers College, where we have a relationship with Teachers College, where they're coming in to provide professional development to our teachers, so that our students are being exposed to the same strategies. Our students are being given the opportunity to engage in reading and writing, and selecting the knowledge that they read, instead of something that is being prescribed to them and telling them what to do. So we're giving students more opportunity for choice and voice and time in terms of the work that they're doing. For the 2 buildings that we have on the state list for comprehensive support and improvement, Bellport Middle School and Brookhaven Elementary, one of the interventions we've been providing to the teachers in those buildings about how to provide higher order questions to students, to engage kids in discussions, but to support our teachers about how do you facilitate that type of discussion. So we have someone who's been coming in, working with those teachers in those buildings about how to facilitate student engagement and to give students opportunity to engage in discussions with each other through complex questions. And so that has been ongoing this year. Equity is a major issue, to provide all students with opportunity and access. It's a major issue that we are tackling this year. And this year we are providing professional development to all district administrators around the issue of equity. We have Dr. Ebony Green, who's been coming in to meet with our administrators. What we hope and plan to do next year is to now branch that out to our teachers around the issue of equity and access for all students in the district. And so we are on the path of doing that with administrators this year, and next year to incorporate that with our teachers. Last year, we did a district-wide school climate survey to our secondary students at the middle school and high school, all our teachers, and we encourage all our parents to participate last year. We plan to do that again in May, again to survey our parents, teachers, and students to get their feedback about what we're doing, how they believe that our students' experience has been in our schools, and use that information to drive and support some of the changes that we are trying to undertake throughout the course of the school year. As a follow-up to the student survey, Mr. Hogan has a climate group of students that he used to review the data from last year about this is what the data told us, this is what you told us. Now tell us how are we doing as we are going through the school year. And they've been providing us with good feedback through that. So we're hoping when we re-administer the survey again in May, we will see that not only the climate group of students share that sentiment, but the student body in general will tell us that we are seeing that we are making improvements in these areas.
So we've sent the survey to the Bellport High School students?
Yes.
Before?
Huh?
Can we get that survey, the results from that survey?
I think I did give that survey to you last year.
I remember it was the surveys that were mandated by ESSA.
Well, that's the same survey. It's the same survey.
But I didn't recall us asking Bellport High School any questions. I thought it was just the ones that were identified.
No, we surveyed the middle school and the high school. And that's what we plan to do this coming year when we do it. We want to move it down to 5th grade at Frankie Law. So we will do that. The state required it for the 2 buildings. We chose as a district to do it to.
Oh, so they didn't say you have to question
No.
the ones that were made?
No.
Interesting.
Okay? And then leverage leadership. We believe that, we have a group of administrators in the district. We all walk into a classroom and we look for different things. And we're looking for different things through different lenses. So one of the things that we thought that it was important for us to do as administrators is how do we shape and look at instruction through the same lens. When we talk about student engagement, what does student engagement look like for me? What does it look like for Mr. Hogan? What does it look like for Mrs. Hohagan? Through leverage leadership, we're coming to a common understanding of what student engagement looks like. So what we've been doing is we have a consultant who's been coming in, meeting with us, and then we do cross-building walkthroughs. Then we go back and we debrief. What did you see? What did you see? And we sit down and have discussions about it. Because we believe that, when you have people at different levels, we've had different experiences. You walk into a classroom and what you see is shaped by what you've always experienced someplace else. And so what we're trying to do is come into a common understanding of what should we be seeing when we go into classrooms, and how do we now use that to support teachers. And so we're engaging in that process through the course of this year. Leverage leadership for all district administrators. And one of the things that we're doing is to focus on aligning our objectives and classroom practices with the standards and providing feedback to our teachers. And so that's some of the work that we're doing to improve the outcomes for students throughout the course of the year. And I thank you, and we will take any questions, comments, or concerns.
Any questions?
Yes, I have some questions.
Ms. DeSanto?
Well, if someone can remind me, the PASS program at the high school, have we had that 5 years now? Or is it
5. Since it's 5,
It is 5
yeah, we
years.
closed after the first.
Do we have the statistics on the success rate for students who've been in PASS? And can you provide that to the board?
We can, and I can tell you that our big bump in the graduation rate was a result of that cohort being brought back to the school. If I'm not
That was that
incorrect,
first
I
time.
remember reporting that to the board initially.
Can we see that?
We can see the following years as well, sure.
And the same thing for credit recovery for 11th and 12th graders. Those who avail themselves of that program, are we seeing results for that? And did anyone have an educated guess as to why we had such a drop this past year when we were on a good track with increasing graduation rates?
Well, I think it's all about the cohort. I'll let Tim, or Mr. Small or Tim, do you want to speak to it?
Sure. Yeah, our obviously the cohort size changes from year to year. as you can see through.
I think one of the things that we had pointed out is that we graduated more kids this past year. We did that
It
the
was
year
a larger
before.
class.
We had a larger class, and we, to be honest with you, we lost more students, but we've been increasing the number of students that we've been graduating. You know, and
This year it's going to dip again.
And just so the board is aware, I anticipate, as Mr. Restivo mentioned, as we stand here right now, our maximum graduation rate for this class would be 88.5. I anticipate we have about 52 at-risk seniors on different levels that we're working with. So I anticipate at the end of this year, our graduation rate will probably mirror what last year was. Probably in the low 80s for June and in the mid 80s for August. That would be my guess as I stand here tonight.
Now, Mr. Hogan, that is based off of the end of the students that have left the district?
So that is based, some have left, you are correct, Mr. Trent. So as I said, right now, if we were to graduate today and everybody that was eligible graduated, our graduation rate would be 88%.
88.
So now we factor in those 52 other students that we are concerned about on various levels. I anticipate our graduation rate will probably mirror what we had last year.
So what is the percentage of the 12th grade class graduating this year? Separate from those that have dropped out?
you know what, for the 20.
I think it's like 332
He's
students.
saying separate from those that have dropped out.
Yeah.
But
All of our current 12th graders now in high school.
So we know, what is it, 280?
280.
280 would be our maximum graduation rate of a cohort of 318.
And you said there's
That's-
52 students in that number who are at risk.
So there are 52 students who we consider at risk, which means they failed one or more courses that they need to meet graduation requirements, or they still need a Regents exam to graduate in June. So that would be my estimate at this point.
So the percentage of students that would graduate that are the 200 and the current 12th grade student body, that graduating class percentage will be different from your calculation once you throw in those 52 students that have left?
So 52 students haven't left. There are 52 that are currently in the building that are still eligible to graduate.
17.
The students that have dropped out from that 2016 cohort is what I mean. So those two percentages will be different.
They combine together. So the students who have already dropped and then
Yeah.
the students who don't graduate later in June come together, and that's what makes our graduation rate.
I have another question. Anybody else have a question?
Okay.
So when you look at the subgroups, the African American subgroup and the SWD,
Students with disability.
student disabilities, and the Hispanic and the ED, what was that saying for again?
Economic disadvantage.
Economic disadvantage. Can you explain why those subgroups are low, and particularly the ones that are identified by race, the black students and the Hispanic students?
Why? Well, I think that's one of the issues and the challenges that we have. And that's one of the issues, the reason why, honestly, that we've been having this discussion around equity is how do we provide access and opportunities to all children? Because when we do look at the data, we see that the children who were disproportionately affected with dropouts or low achievement are students of color. And so how do we better meet the needs of those children? We have to confront that frontally. We have to do it honestly. And so that's why we're beginning to have those discussions first with our administrators, so that we all have the same language and expectations for what we expect for our children. And then we start having that discussion with our teachers. We have to do so. We are providing additional support to our second language learners by increasing the amount of support we provide to them in the classroom with our code to our classes. But we also have to be honest and recognized about perceptions and expectations for children. Well, one of the reasons why we are pushing very hard for open enrollment in our challenging classes is because, again, we want to give access and opportunities to all children. And if kids are failing, some of our kids have learned or been given the impression that they cannot take AP courses. But what we're saying is put them into courses. If they need additional support, we'll provide them with support. But we want to make sure that we give all kids those opportunities.
But Mr. Small, all of our students in AP courses need support.
Yes, no, what I'm saying is, we don't want kids to say, I cannot take that course because I might not do well. We want them to take the challenge, and if they're not doing well, we continue to provide them with support.
But a lot of our students in AP courses aren't doing well, though.
And we are going to continue to provide teachers with that support. Again, I don't think the issues that we're facing is a one issue or one issue solution. We have to take a multifaceted approach to how we're doing it. We have to provide our teachers with continuous professional development. And after doing so, we have to be in the classroom on a regular basis to see, is there connection to the practice and the PD that we've provided, right? We've provided you PD about asking higher order questions. Are we seeing that when we walk into classrooms? We have provided PD about encouraging kids to engage in discussions. When we walk into classrooms, are we seeing that? One of the things that Dr. Gianni and us and Mr. Hogan discussed is we want to start changing out the furniture in the classrooms to give kids more opportunities instead of the rows that they're sitting in, to move it into the 21st century, where kids are sitting around tables, and so that they can engage in collaborative work as we're going through this. But that takes time, but those are the things that we're trying to do. So we do recognize that there's an issue, and we're trying to address it with how we are providing PD, how we're providing support to our teachers, and how we are also providing support to our administrators to ensure those things are taking place.
My next question is in regards to the students that you have identified that will not graduate this year. I noticed you listed A, B, C, D, and F. A lot of the commonalities is the attendance
Yes.
and not meeting
Yes.
the standards. And through the presentation, the attendance issue was only addressed by letters home or notification. Is there any other?
No. Yes, we are the letters are sent home. There's a point where the principal steps in and have meetings with children and their parents. We do use our community liaisons to go out and meet with, go to homes to try to get kids back into the building. But, when you're a high schooler, if you say you're not coming back to school, there's the challenge of attendance at the high school is a little bit more challenging than at the elementary levels where parents are putting you in a bus and sending you to school. Where 11th and 12th graders say I'm not going, it's a little bit harder. So one of the things that we also have to look at too is what is the environment in the building? Are we giving kids opportunities where they feel that there's a connection between what they're learning, right? Rigor, relevance, and relationship. They are seeing what they're learning connected to their lives, and are they making the right connections to the grown-ups and other students in the building? And so those are just some of the conversations we're having. And it's not going to happen overnight, but we're beginning to have those conversations and hoping that we'll see improvements.
And the attendance protocol, Mr. Trent, is not letters alone, it's reaching out. Teachers make phone calls home, social workers make phone calls home, guidance counselors make phone calls home. There's a step process where the connections are attempted to be made with the families. It's not just a letter that goes.
Two quick things. One, I'll just piggyback on attendance, since we spoke about attendance. I do think part of attendance is also being able to provide children at any level, whether it's the high school or the middle school, the opportunities to want to come to school. And sometimes that's just that connection that they're having for whatever the activity is or the individual. If a child is not performing well, they don't want to come to school. So maybe we need to look into how we're providing those opportunities and those connections for the students to individuals and to activities. Second, focusing a little bit here on slide 5, our LEP students that are, we're obviously increasing our LEPs, but we're also increasing, for the most part, the amounts that are not graduating. Now, this is kind of a twofold question. Is that some of our children that are dropping out, or are these students staying here and we need to look into our program? I noticed we went from 14 students, one of them graduated in 2016-17, then in 2017-18 we had 17 LEP students, 7 of them graduated, so we were looking pretty good there. Last year we had 25, so we had that increase, and only 6 of them graduated from there. So are we seeing them moving away or dropping out rather, or is it part of the program that we need to look into for our LEPs?
So I would say both. So there is a large portion, I mentioned before earlier for this year's cohort, 23 students out of the 31 that had dropped were E&L students. But as one of the slides had mentioned, I don't know which number, but about our change in E&L program.
Yeah.
So our program has vastly changed in the last 3 years, and we're hoping that will now reflect further. So the students that are in this year's cohort, when they came here, we only had co-taught E&L classes in social studies. But now going forward, we now have the psych classes, we also have algebra, we have living environment, and we're hoping to add more in the future as well. So we are broadening our program so that those students might have a better chance.
And for our E&L students, like our monolingual students, are they in an E&L class or are they in a fully inclusive bilingual class? Are they receiving like social studies in native language and in their English? I don't know how that works in the high school here.
So that is a co-taught model. So that is a content area teacher and then also an E&L teacher.
Right.
So as Ms. Restivo said, it's reflected in the one slide there that in the past 4 or 5 years, we've built capacity in our E&L program with additional co-taught classes, including our psych class for E&L, ELA, to try and our Saturday Academy to support our students and hopefully make them feel that graduation is an attainable goal.
Right. So, but our E&L teachers not necessarily are fluent in the native language.
No, not all.
So, right,
Not all.
so if we have a student who is monolingual that's in an E&L co-teaching classroom environment in, say, living environment.
Some of our, like for example, I know like for example, the Algebra 1 class, one of the teachers bilingual. So they're getting that, but not all of our co-taught classes have a teacher who's a second language.
So they're not getting instruction in their native language too. So that might be an area that we need to discuss and think about, because we are definitely increasing our E&L population, and our students that are monolingual, which are in our E&L program, are not getting instruction in native language, so they're going to become further and further behind.
Anybody else?
Quick question, do we track each cohort based on the percentage of students who enter the cohort halfway through, or transient students, or students that enter late, that aren't here with us for a full 4 years?
Yes. So if you see some of the data we presented.
And I saw some of it, yeah.
Yes. So we are, and the cohort constantly changes, but we're tracking to see who comes in, when kids leave. Well, yes.
Okay.
It's a regular review of each.
And the students that don't graduate, and I see some of it here, but unless I'm missing something, it's not a complete picture, but like I'm seeing a lot of kids not graduating due to absences, missing a year of school and things like that. I mean, how far do we drill down into the students who don't graduate as to why? How many, how much is on, to Ms. Aruta's point, programs and things like that versus not coming to school, whatever issue comes up, skipping a year, whatever the reason is, medical issues, et cetera.
So I'll let Ms. Restivo speak a little bit to that as well, but our counselors have an intimate knowledge of every student in their caseload. And those kinds of discussions and interventions and meetings take place from the time the student enters the high school, right up through their graduating year.
don't know if you want.
Yes, so one of the interventions that you saw on the slide was about SST, which is the Student Support Team meeting. So that happens every single Monday, where every high school counselor, school psychologist, and school social worker, as well as the assistant principals for all 4 grade levels, we all come together in one room and we discuss our at-risk students and what we can do to better help them. So a problem is presented and we come up with a solution of what we'll do, and those students are then monitored. So then we come up with a date to then revisit that student to see what progress they've made. So that happens every single Monday.
So I guess what I'm getting at, and when you look at some of the numbers, and some of them are okay, some of them aren't great, and we talk about dips and things like that, I guess my question is, how many students are there that no matter what we do, they're so far behind? We got an English language learner in 11th grade, right? They're now a part of a cohort, and they really didn't have an opportunity, and nor did we have an opportunity to help them. So how do we look at that, and how do we identify that? Because if what I'm guessing and what I'm seeing here is that when we have students in a cohort that are active participants in their education, for whatever reason they are or are not, they seem to succeed. Is that a fair statement? Okay. And I think sometimes that needs to be recognized, because when we look at a poor graduation rate, a lot of it is put back in the district and say, well, teachers aren't doing this, administration's not doing that, what's going on? Well, we are doing things, but sometimes we get a case that's so far behind, it's going to take more than a 4-year, maybe it's a 5 or 6, or sometimes the student may leave and go to another district. I'm sure there's a lot of that, I think, that can, and I guess I'm looking for justification for those that aren't graduating and why.
Absolutely. So, I think a lot of what you said is true. So that is the case where, there are certain circumstances where, I think it was the last student that's on that non-graduation list just moved to this country in November, and he will count against our graduation rate. There are some circumstances where, that is the case, and that's not something that we can control. But in other cases, we do know the situations, and that's why we're putting together those different programs and action plans to try to improve those things.
I think it's important too, especially when we talk about equity in schools. I'm sure, for example, Hempstead's graduation rate is incredibly low, right? We know they probably get the largest amount of, English language learners in high school that move into the district. So those are some of the things that I think need to be a part of the conversation before we look at data and say, well, that percentage is really bad. Why aren't you doing your job? Well, there's circumstances beyond our control, and I think that needs to be discussed.
The other thing then, the other thing I think that's important to know is when we get new entrants, new entrants, obviously that's a case-by-case review of where they have come from, what their educational background might be. If we receive documentation, what does it look like? And now, then every student is given what's called an ISOTEL exam, which kind of determines where they are academically. And then we created this year a team, which includes Ms. Tetuan, our counselors, Mr. Latori, who's one of our bilingual APs, who takes a look at each new entrant and determines what cohort they should be placed in. So there is a lot of flexibility. Those are educated guesses.
So, I'm sorry, so just so I understand what you just said, because that's important for me. So if somebody comes in and they moved in here as a senior, you're saying we can put them in another, and we say it's gonna take them 3 years to graduate, we can put them in a different cohort that lines up with when they would potentially graduate if they do what they need to do.
Partially true. So what happens is we look at their educational records and what they gave us. So if a student moves here and says, I haven't been educated in high school, we will put them in a freshman cohort, because this is when they're starting high school is with us. Whereas if a student comes to us and says, here are my high school records, I've been in school since the 2016 school year, well then that will be their cohort. So we go based on what they give us.
So then what happens in that scenario, and I apologize for the question, but in that type of scenario, if a student ages out before they can graduate, I mean, how often does that happen? Because I believe that happened last year with one student or the year before, right?
I can't give you an exact number. I can get back to you.
And that's okay. I mean, but is it a common
it does
problem?
happen.
Is it, a couple kids a year? I mean, what's your gut tell you?
I would say a handful a year. But there are things that we look at. So when a student comes to register and that is the case, that we see their age, we discuss with them their options. What other educational options are there? And they're allowed to choose whatever one of those options are.
Sure. And then I think I read in here, and I want to make sure I understood it, is that if somebody goes out and gets I think they changed the name of the diploma. What was it called before?
The IEP diploma.
The IP diploma. So then that can reflect positively back on numbers, or no, once they're gone, they're gone? Is that what you said?
So skills and achievement commencement credential is for students that are alternately assessed in the life skills and autism program. They're always going to be considered as non-completers, and that's across New York State. So no matter when they decide to leave us, they're considered a non-completer.
But the kid who drops out of school and then goes to the BOCES program and gets his diploma.
You're talking about the GED.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I was reading something, I got confused. So yes, my wife used to teach it, so I should know it, but yes, the GED
So,
students.
yeah, it's a task, it's called the task exam now, so New York State has stopped giving the GED exam, it's called the task, but it's the same thing.
I knew they changed
They are
somewhere.
counted as non-completers as well.
Regardless of what they do after the fact. Because I know, I know a student specifically who I know real well, who last year, there was no way he was going to graduate. He was gonna be probably gonna age out. He made a conscious decision to drop out and get his GED so that he can get into Suffolk, he can go to school, and he can start his life. Sometimes that's a conscious decision, that's part of the plan. So how often do you think that happens?
I think that happens, but typically when they are a little older, not
A little older.
at their graduation rate. You can't sit for the task exam in Eastern Suffolk BOCES district until your graduating class has already graduated.
Okay.
That's one of their stipulations. So once our graduation rate has been determined, that's when they're actually allowed to sit for the exam. So it wouldn't
Okay,
be before.
gotcha. Thank you.
I have a question. I went on the New York State Education Department website, and they have a chart of graduation rates, and I guess that's based on numbers that were given by our district. And there was also this article in Newsday. So the graduation rate, according to Newsday, is consistent with the graduation rate that came out of the ed department. But the rate is considerably lower than what you're showing for the four-year graduation rate for the class of 2019. Can you straighten out why I don't understand this?
Absolutely. So Newsday got their information from the state education department, so that is where they got their numbers. So whatever you see on that website is what you would see in their article. That is a South Country Central School District number, not Belport High School. So for example, there were 9 students in last year's graduating class that count towards the South Country number, not Belport High School, but we are not educating those students within our school district. So they might be going to an out-of-district BOCES placement, they could be being educated somewhere else. So they will count on the state education department's number for South Country, but not Belport High School. So the numbers that we're presenting you are Belport High School, because those are the students we are educating within the district.
Thank you.
So if you remember the legislative breakfast, and I won't mention the district's name, but the district reported a 97% graduation rate. We can look and see what that says.
What it really was, okay.
Any other questions for our administrator? Thank you very much. That was quite comprehensive and appreciated. Okay, we now have 4 policies. I know that at one point at the time of the first reading, I ran through them all and looked for questions. Would you like me to do that again, rather than go one at a time?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that a yes?
Probably need to come up for air at some point.
It's not that good. Okay. So we have a few policies up for the board's first reading. First is policy 5410 regarding purchasing. This is an active policy that was actually recently revised in April. It was then submitted to the State Education Department as part of a grant monitoring review, and the state told us you have to add something. They said you need to add officer and agent, so we simply inserted those 2 words in the document, as you can see. Prepared it for you both in red line and final version, and of course it has been reviewed by the Strategic Planning Committee. The next policy is policy 6121, sexual harassment in the workplace. This is an active policy that's up for revision as a result of an enacted New York State labor law, section 201G, which requires all employees in New York State to adopt a written policy addressing prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace that meets certain minimum standards specific to the new law. The standards include a new definition of what constitutes sexual harassment, along with the requirement of annual sexual harassment prevention training. The policy revision meets the new standards, has been reviewed and approved by council as well as the board's advisory committee on strategic planning. And that is also a first reading. The next policy is policy 6215, probation and tenure. This is an active policy that is up for revision as a result of changes in the length of probation period for certified instructional employees, as well as annual professional performance review requirements. This policy has also been reviewed by council and the board's advisory committee for strategic planning, and also a first reading. And finally is board policy 7440, student voter registration and pre-registration. This is a new policy. It is required as a result of the new law, election law, section 5-507, which requires districts to adopt policies to promote student voter registration and pre-registration. This new policy has been developed with input from our high school administration, faculty, and students. Most likely students that were sitting right there because Mr. Buttress and Ms. O'Hagan were involved in the development. It has, of course, been reviewed and approved by council and the board's advisory committee for strategic planning, and I offer that as a first reading for the board's review and discussion. That is all four. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
No questions?
I will bring these as a second reading and action at our February 26th meeting.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
And I think I'm still up.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to curriculum instruction. Administration recommends approval of curriculum items reflected in Schedule G1 through G2.
You have that as curriculum and instruction? Somehow, I have
Board consent curriculum G.
G, I have personnel.
You didn't move something.
Curriculum of mine.
Yeah, it's curriculum one. We're on G.
Yeah, how did that? I have it as G on mine.
I have G as well.
You have G?
Oh, no, look on the board, it says G, it says personnel.
Oh, she.
I have personnel.
Oh, yeah.
Something happened.
You want to take
Mate,
it?
well-
We still have it as G in.
What is personnel, what is curriculum under?
H. Curriculum's under.
Yes, that's
It moved-
H.
In mine, it's under G.
G, and H is personnel.
Maybe
Maybe
you need
will
to
you all refresh?
Maybe everybody needs to refresh.
Let's refresh. So we're all talking the same language.
You just hit that circular button.
Yeah, that little circular arrow at the top.
And then I go here.
And I go.
Yes, that changed it.
And I am, yeah.
And now you just lost, oh wait, now it's H is,
Oh, wow.
CSE and CPSE.
Okay,
Your-
So
some-
G
your
is
curriculum.
personnel.
Someone with access had some sticky fingers, so. Okay, so administration recommends approval of personnel items reflected in Schedule G1 through G11.
Are you already making the motion?
It's 10 o'clock, we'll go.
I'd like to second it.
Sure.
Okay, did you get that? Mr. Nix made the motion and Mr. Pacini seconded it. Any questions or discussion about these? No? All in favor of approving these items? Yes, everybody who's here voted to approve it. Now you're on H, which
Okay,
is
I would
curriculum.
just first like to announce the board did approve tenure recommendations of Faith Compton Lee, a middle school guidance counselor, and Nadine Perez, a high school teaching assistant. Do not see them here, but please extend our congratulations to them tomorrow. And moving on to curriculum, administration recommends approval of curriculum items reflected in Schedule H1 and H2.
Is there a motion, Mr. Trent, to approve this? Will second, Mr. Nix. Any discussion or questions? Okay. All in favor of approving H1 and H2? Let's see, that's unanimously approved.
And moving on to business, administration recommends approval of business items reflected in Schedules I1 through I11.
Is there a motion? Mr. Nix made the motion. Second by Ms. Aruda. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of approving these? So unanimous approval.
That is all I
No
have.
more, no cards for?
Cards, please. No cards.
Nobody? Okay. All right. I think we now get to find out if any of the trustees have anything they want to make in the way of closing remarks. Carly?
Hope everyone has a nice February break.
Ms. DeSanto?
Well, we was talking about graduation rates tonight, and there's been something that's been proposed the last 2 years around graduation time by parents. And I was hoping we could put it on a future agenda for a new graduation tradition here at South Country, possibility of discussing that. Other school districts have their graduating seniors actually in cap and gown go back to their elementary schools, and it seems to
We're
be
doing
well
it.
received by everybody.
It's already been done?
We're doing that.
We
I
have
reported
gone-
that, yeah. I don't
Oh,
remember
okay,
when.
because that, we've
Yeah.
been talking about, a lot of parents.
Ms.
have talked about
Dowler,
the last 2
our
years.
new elementary guidance counselor,
Okay,
is
so-
organizing it.
What-
Got the
okay.
bus. What's
Good
the
to
date,
hear.
Mr. Hogan?
It's on the
It's
Tuesday before
Tuesday before graduation.
So I think the
They
gowns are
rehearse-
ordered
they go from
early,
the
we have the
rehearsal
bus.
day to rehearsal.
Bringing them
They're
in.
gonna leave rehearsal
Great.
with their cap and gown.
We're gonna blitz the elementary school.
Perfect, thank you. All right. I had a note, because last year we thought about it again and it was late, and I said I
Well,
promised I would bring it up this
It's
year.
one of those things, we always think about those things when it's too late, and then we forget to bring it out when it's
I had it
too
on my
early.
list of things to do.
It's
I could
But it's
check
right,
off
it's
the
brought up
list.
every year, and
It's
it's always
wonderful.
reported on the news, it's always, it's a nice
It
tradition to
really
start.
is, it's wonderful, it really is, it's
Everybody
definitely,
enjoys it.
especially the younger teachers that we don't get to see them come high school, so it's wonderful, it really is a very emotional day for us young elementary school teachers.
Do you have anything, Ms. Aruda?
Good night.
I guess real quick, I forgot to mention this before. Last week on Friday, I went to my first ever sweetheart dance with my daughter, Frank B. Long. So I've been waiting forever. My wife got to go to it for the boys, so I got to go. It was a really nice night. And I've been to a lot of PTA events and things that are run by that, but I've never seen so many volunteers and so many enthusiastic volunteers as I have at the Sweetheart Dance. So I wanted to, and I know Mr. Oresco's here, is just thank everybody who put that together, because it really was a wonderful event. And I did think that this is also an opportunity where I think we should take a day, a board meeting, where we should recognize those that volunteer in our schools in some way as a board, show our appreciation, specifically maybe the PTA officers. Maybe there could be a night, maybe it could be like the tenure reception, maybe we have a reception for half an hour before a meeting. I think it would be nice, and it's not just PTA parents, but there's a lot of parents who I think volunteer and come into our schools, and I think we should be good stewards and say, good neighbors and say, hey, thank you, in a more meaningful way. Maybe a certificate, photo op, whatever it is. But I think we should be doing stuff like that.
Mr. Trent?
I agree with Mr. Puccini's point. I actually wanted to mention something, one of my takeaways from visiting Vern W. Critt's PTA meeting last night. They were doing a lot of fundraisers that I was unaware of but wanted to participate in. And that's kind of a trend that I've noticed from visiting bouncing around PTA meetings that they are doing a lot of fundraising, but I want to be aware of what they're doing so I could show my support and then drag my family members along with me. So if there's some way that Dr. Johnny, you could in like an update or something, kind of just give us a dump of the months or 2 months PTA events, so I'm aware of it and can support them.
I'll reach out to President's Council and we'll try to brainstorm a way to do that, sure.
Mr. Nix?
Just some thank yous. Thank you to Munistat Services for their $250 donation to the high school scholarship fund. And thank you to Donors Choose and those individuals making donations in support of classroom projects at Frank P. Long in Miss Selman and Miss Claven's classes. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, who wants to make the motion to adjourn?
Cameron's already here.
Was your hand first, Mr. Trent?
I think that was the only hand.
Yes. We were giving it to Mr.
All right,
Trent.
who wants to second? Okay, Mr. Ruda. Any discussion or questions about adjournment? All in favor?
Unanimous,
Unanimously agreed to. Thank you.